Good evening. Welcome, everybody. You are at the Vesta Divorce webinar, Preparing for Divorce in 2026. My name is Renee Coleman, and we are happy to have you with us. At Vesta, our mission is to provide education, connection, and support to help you navigate the divorce process with clarity and confidence. We just celebrated our 13th year. Vesta began because the three founders wanted a better experience for those going through divorce. So today's session is focused on the how to prepare for divorce, a topic that can feel overwhelming, but one that's critical to ensuring your future stability and peace of mind. So again, for those that were not on the call yet, you'll see a poll if you wouldn't mind answering that. And please feel free to ask any questions through the Q&A, which is at the bottom of your screen, and it is anonymous. We've got an experienced panel with us tonight, all professionals who share their insights on preparing for divorce, covering everything from financial, pre and post divorce, and the legal aspects, mortgage and real estate, as well as your emotional state. So the legal piece tonight, so you're aware, our attorneys are New Hampshire attorneys on this call. They do practice in Massachusetts as well, but tonight's topic will cover New Hampshire law. There are other events in other states. If you get on the Vesta website, you can find some other presentations available in other states across the country. So we all volunteer our time with Vesta. We don't work for Vesta. We work with Vesta. When it comes to working with any of us, you can work with one of us or all of us. It's your choice. You can mix and match your team as you see fit. And we're all happy to offer a consultation to help you determine who's a good fit for your team. So with that, we are going to start tonight with some introductions of our panel. And I'm going to turn it over to Barb to say hello.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Barb Shigog. I am a CDFA, so Certified Divorce Financial Analyst. I work on the financial side, helping either couples as a financial neutral or working for one person as their financial advocate. It's important to add a finance person to your team, really to give you clarity on what you're receiving, as well as it allows your attorney to focus on the legal aspects, and then the finance person helps you get up to speed and helps you understand what your settlement you might be getting and can find anything that might not be right financially. I work with people going through divorce while they're planning, when they're in the middle of it, looking at just settlement offers, and then post-divorce, helping them head off to a new investment manager to get their investment program situated. With that, I'll hand over to Michelle.
Actually, we're going to pass it on. Michelle's going to go last because she's presenting first tonight.
Okay.
So I'll pass it over to Robin.
Good evening, everyone. So Robin Young, a partner at North Star Financial Planning, and we specialize in helping clients post-divorce. Once you've signed your decree, helping you really understand your new financial reality, helping you understand your financial and life options, helping you create a plan for your future and increase your sense of confidence and well-being. I work closely with the team members pre-divorce often. One of the things I'll talk about is putting together your team when you're going through the process so that you can have more successful outcome in your post-divorce life. So then I will pass it over to Kate.
Thanks. I'm Kate Blake. I am a family law attorney. As Renee mentioned, I am licensed in Massachusetts as well as New Hampshire. If we talk about substantive issues, that will be focused on New Hampshire. I think some of it will also be process-oriented and just general steps in getting ready for divorce. So if you're not in New Hampshire, that may be applicable to you. But if you have a specific question that's related to the law and you're not in New Hampshire, I would urge you to get in touch with Mandy, our concierge, who can point you in the right direction. I practice both out-of-court resolution, so I help people through the mediation process. I am a collaboratively trained attorney. I do direct attorney negotiation. And then a component of my practice is also litigation, helping people through the court systems. I think I've been with Vesta for going on 6 years now. And what's great about it is that the law is the law, and I can help you get through that part. But so many other things affect your life that is just not part of my wheelhouse. And so it's great to have vetted professionals to make sure that you have a great team to help you get through this process.
Excellent. Thank you, Kate. And next up, we have Laura.
Hey everyone, good evening. My name is Laura Gamache. I'm a real estate broker. I am licensed in New Hampshire and Massachusetts as well. I work very closely with a lot of the divorce situations at all different phases, whether it's just very early on, evaluating what it looks like with a lot of couples that are splitting, what is going to be happening with the home, whether someone's going to be either buying out the home from a partner or going to be selling it and or whichever. Typically, they're going to need to know what the options look like and what the home is worth. So I work with a lot of divorce situations. They're all different. Everyone's situation is very differently. Definitely just kind of assessing what they need and what makes the most sense, and then really working closely with your panelists here, because we're all really interconnected throughout this process, because one really needs one thing to do the next steps, right? So your attorney is going to need to know how to negotiate what your biggest asset is, which I can help with that, and or someone's going to be buying out. They need to have that to be able to talk to Renee. So again, we're all here and very interconnected. We work well together. And that's why it's really just having that good kind of team behind you approach is just really how you can get through this as smoothly, as easily as possible. So thanks everyone for being here.
Thanks, Laura. Next up, we have Lori.
Sorry about that. I was on mute. Yes. Hi, my name is Lori Barron. I am also, like Kate, a licensed attorney in Massachusetts, New Hampshire. I'm also licensed in Connecticut. My firm is Babbo Barron LLP, and what I focus my practice on is strictly out-of-court resolution, dispute resolution, divorce mediation, collaborative law. So I help individuals who have decided not to go down the litigation path come to a fair and equitable agreement to present to the court for approval. As a mediator and a neutral third party, I don't represent either parties. I just help them come to an agreement. In the collaborative role, I do represent one party, but the process is the same. We sit down with the other side's attorney, with the team consisting of a CDFA, divorce coach, all of these, the members of the panel you see here in those roles, and we help individuals work through their divorce in the most amicable way possible, avoiding litigation. So I am also collaboratively trained and also a certified divorce mediator. And as I said, I do it in New Hampshire and Massachusetts as well, and Connecticut. But right now, New Hampshire is what we're focusing on. So I do it there as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Lori. And do we still have Mandy on the call? Mandy, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Mandy Pullenbar, and I am a concierge specialist with Vesta. I've been with the organization 6 years this January, and it's really an honor to be able to speak to individuals and work with individuals as they navigate forward, helping you create a roadmap. Whether it be you need all of these amazing professionals or a handful of them, we help discern that during our call. We will be following up after the event tomorrow. If you're not available when we call, there is a calendar link that I just put in the chat that you can schedule a time that's convenient for you. Or you can just listen. Thank you for being here. And I look forward to speaking with you very soon.
Thanks, Mandy. And I am Renee Coleman. I'm a certified divorce lending professional, and I'm the founder of Divorce Mortgage Planning of New England. So I work with clients, helping them understand all of their mortgage options, keep the house, sell the house, buy a spouse out. What does all that mean? That's how I work with my clients. I've been a part of Vesta for a little over 5 years now and work in divorce every day and love doing what I do and helping as many people as I can. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle, and she's going to get us started tonight with our presentation. So enjoy.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Michelle Papander. I'm a certified divorce coach. A divorce coach is kind of like your thinking partner, sounding board. It's someone who walks through the whole process with you side by side, non-judgmental, neutral party, helping you make the best decisions for yourself. So divorce involves legal, financial, and emotional. And I'm here to talk a little bit more on the emotional side, even though as a coach, I walk alongside through the whole process. So we're here to talk about getting prepared for divorce. It's something that I specialize in. So if you're contemplating divorce or you're just getting started, it can be very overwhelming, scary. You could be grieving. You're really not sure what to do. And the more you talk through it with myself or anybody else on this call, the more clarity you're going to get. So one of the first things is really understanding how you feel. What's driving your feelings? What's driving you to start contemplating separating or divorce? Because the more you understand, the more clarity you have, the more confidence you have, the more you can be empowered to make decisions from an informed, empowered position than from fear, or we're getting you prepared to have the difficult conversations, even if it randomly pops up before you think it's going to pop up. You'll be more prepared. And the clarity that you get by working with myself or anyone else on the team, it helps you make, like I said, that informed decision. As you've heard us all say, creating a divorce team can be very important. We all have friends, we all have family. But when you talk to, say, myself as a coach, we not only talk about the emotional pieces, but we talk about the process. What does it look like? How do you feel about it? And then we can look at who do you need on your team, right? And sometimes the first one could be a financial person if you're really stressed and concerned about finances, right? Maybe you just heard Lori speak and you aren't sure. What does collaborative mean? What is mediation? You've never heard of it. Maybe going into mediation is your best option, but you've never heard of it. So we really talk about what does everything mean? What questions do you have? How do you feel? Being able to make informed decisions, as well as managing stress and anxiety. Divorce can bring up so much anxiety, whether you're the one preparing to ask for divorce or you were just asked for the divorce. Being able to find the tools to work through the stress and anxiety, exercise, breathing, yoga, things like that. So I actually today, in one of the support groups that I ran, I asked my group, because most of them are in divorce or post-divorce, and they said the most important thing is getting your ducks in a row. And so that's what we're all here for, is to be able to provide you with a team of people to answer all of your questions. Sometimes, like I said, it's starting with a coach and working through everything. Sometimes the financial piece is the most important to you, and that's where Barb would come into play. Maybe you're really stressed about the house, and can you buy your spouse out? Can you afford the house? All things that Renee and Laura will talk about further into tonight. We can also talk through parenting. What does it mean to co-parent? How do you establish a co-parenting plan? How do you not only tell your spouse or ask your spouse for a divorce, but how do you tell your kids at any age, even if they're 25, 35? How do you talk to your kids? How might they react? And being prepared, we do a lot of role playing if that's something you're interested in. I'm pretty good at getting angry, but I'm not very good at doing the crying piece of the role playing. But I really help you think it through and challenge you to be prepared. And then we can talk through exactly what you want to say, usually keeping it brief and to the point, but being there and being supportive to your spouse and your family. And again, creating that parenting plan that I believe Kate and Lori will also talk about when they come up. Again, the emotional pieces of divorce that you may not be aware of, your friends and family, if they've never gone through divorce, may not be sure how to support you. And in some cases, once the divorce is out there, relationships with family and friends can change, being very isolating. As a coach, I'm here for you. I'm here for what's best for you. and to walk side by side with you through the whole process, making sure you have all the support and resources that you need. Kate and Lori, I believe, are next.
Right, my mouse didn't want to move. All right, so I think what Lori and I want to focus on in terms of preparing for divorce in 2026 is first understanding what your process options are. And I will go over kind of court and litigation and what that means. And then Lori will go over out of court options. And then we'll go over a couple of other things as well. So, with respect to divorce in New Hampshire, there's really two ways to file for divorce. And that's either a joint petition where you're in agreement to get divorced, or an individual filing, which is just a petition for divorce. And those start a court process itself with some required mandatory disclosures, which are a financial affidavit, which you actually will need regardless of what process option you have, as well as what we call Rule 1.25A mandatory disclosure, which is tax returns and bank statements and credit card statements and a variety of kind of basic information that you need in order to get divorced. When you file in New Hampshire, that complaint, you will have a what's called a first appearance, where they will explain the court system to you and your spouse, along with other people who have recently filed. And they will highly encourage mediation. In New Hampshire, they have court mediation, as well as you can opt for private mediation. I don't have a lot of biases in life, but I personally have a bias towards private mediation. I think that private mediators are a lot more skilled than the court mediators. And as I mentioned, Laura will explain the mediation process and what that means. So my big tips for helping you think through divorcing in next year is really focusing on that financial affidavit, because that is a document that you will need through whatever process option you need. And I find that a lot of clients are very overwhelmed by the idea of that financial affidavit, because you have to list your income, your assets, your liabilities, as well as your expenses. And that's also a document that someone like Barb can come in very handy as a CDFA in helping you put that document together so that it comes to me, your attorney, and basically I review it, make minimal changes, and it's really good to go and be filed with the court. The other thing I think is important is thinking about that 1.25A disclosures and what might be helpful for you. If you are in a litigated process, you have to provide that. If you are in an out-of-court process, then you can produce those documents, or you can agree to limit that in some way. Moving back to the court process itself, when you file, it starts a whole cascade of events of service. As I mentioned, that first appearance, the court wants to try and keep things on track in terms of working your way through the court system. If necessary, the court will schedule you for something called a temporary orders hearing, a structuring conference, basically where they're trying to figure out what's going on in your case. Do you need temporary orders, which are an order from the court requiring a parenting plan, child support, alimony on a temporary basis to help get you through the process? Like, what do we need to do on a temporary basis while you're working yourself through all the decisions that have to be made in order to get divorced? Ultimately, if you are in a litigated process, you may end up having a pretrial conference. That's the time by which you have to show up to court, having completed all of your discovery, and also really have engaged in some meaningful settlement discussions. So you can have a conversation with the judge about what are these issues? Why are we not able to resolve this case? And what can we do to get us to that point? Because the vast majority of cases settle at some point along the way, either out of court, and even the ones that are in court. I think that statistic that I hear all the time is 3 to 5% of cases actually end up with a trial where a judge makes a final decision. So it's important to keep in mind that really you can be the driver here, and you can make sure that you are learning all that you need to know in order to make educated, informed decisions in order to get divorced. And I think I'll talk a little bit about like timelines and cost before I ask Lori to come on. When I talk about contested versus uncontested, that's really, are we talking about a litigated process, or are we out of court? I know Lori thinks of it a little bit differently as somebody who wears the mediator hat. In a contested case, New Hampshire, the average divorce really, I say, is around a year to settlement. If you needed a trial, you're looking at much more time than a year. So it can take some time to work through the court system. The best question that I always get asked at consults is how much is going to cost? And unfortunately, that's not really something that I can answer. I can tell people what my hourly rate is, but in terms of how much it's going to cost, that really depends on how the other person reacts to the divorce, how many times you have to be in court, how much of a fight are they going to put up. If it's more amicable and smooth and you don't need to be in court a ton of times, it's going to be on the lower end. But if you're going to have multiple court hearings and people not complying with court orders, or you're going to need review hearings, at that point, the cost is just really going to take off from there. I don't know that I have anything else, but maybe something will come to mind as Lori talks through mediation and collaborative law.
Thank you, Kate. So what I want to do is I just want to start off defining which each of them are, what they mean, what mediation means, what collaborative law means, because I'm sure a lot of people heard about mediation. Not a lot of people have heard about collaborative law. So mediation is a process where parties decide that they don't want to go through litigation for whatever reason, and there's many reasons not to go through litigation, which I'll get to in a moment. But it's a space where both parties try to resolve the issue. Their neutral third party is there to help facilitate that conversation. And the mediator, a lot of them are attorneys, like I'm an attorney, but we don't give legal advice. But our knowledge of how the court works, of the litigation process, having litigated, that's invaluable in terms of setting the framework within which the decision and the resolution can be made. What would be acceptable to a judge, what the rules are. So the mediator helps facilitate that conversation and allows a space for each party to be heard. Now, when Kate was talking before about the differences between court mediation and private mediation, the difference is that in court mediation, there isn't the team that is available in private mediation. So they don't have a certified financial advisor. They don't have a divorce coach. And they're usually limited amount of sessions you can have for a certain price. So if you have children, or if there are longstanding kind of resentments or issues that need to be dealt with before the issues can be resolved, those things are not going to be addressed in the court mediation process. So that's why a private mediator is the best option in those situations. And I know myself, I do a flat fee for the mediation. So it's a one-time charge. You know what your investment is, your costs are upfront, and then you can pay that and just focus on resolving the issues without worrying how much it's going to cost. With mediation, it's not mediation or nothing. If you try mediation and it doesn't work, you always have that remedy in court to go to deal with it through the court system. And sometimes you may do that and then realize maybe we can mediate it, so you can go back to mediation. They're not mutually exclusive. It's not one or the other. So it's a really helpful tool to save time, to save stress, to save money, and come to the same resolution, the fair and equitable, fair resolution that the court would order, but it's on your own terms, and you get to make the decision. And instead of having a judge tell you what's going to happen based on each party's argument, you don't lose your rights. It's actually, everything has to be approved by the court. So you're not losing your rights. Your rights will be protected. So I think a lot of people fear, especially in the power and balance relationship, that if they go to mediation, they're going to not get what they want. But the whole purpose of the mediation is for the mediator to assess whether there is that power balance and make sure everyone is being heard. Now, with divorce mediation, you're encouraged to have an attorney review your agreement. So again, you have legal representation, if not at the table, definitely behind the scenes. So you're not doing it all on your own. Collaborative law, on the other hand, you are represented by an attorney. But again, it's the same. Everything that I said about mediation applies to collaborative law. except that you're going into it with an attorney. The only difference between mediation and the collaborative law is that the collaborative law attorney that's representing you cannot then litigate it. So you would have to get a new attorney if you're going to litigate it. But again, if you decide to do that, you're not stuck in litigation if you realize it's a better avenue for you to go as the litigation goes on, that you want to try collaborative again. So they really work hand in hand. It's designed to be alternatives. That's why it's called alternative dispute resolution. But the bottom line is, in all processes, the court has the final say in what happens at the end. And I think I said everything. I just want to drive home the fact that mediation, it's on your timeline. So you don't have court dates. The only time it goes to court is when everything is resolved and you have an agreement that you want to present. As Kate said, the discovery is still a part of it. There has to be transparency. There has to be full disclosure. Same thing with collaborative law. But you're doing it on your own timeline. And as Michelle spoke about earlier, it can be a very emotional time. And sometimes you just need to take a step back, take a break, and kind of relax a little bit and process everything, and then pick it up again so you can move forward. And mediation allows you that time to do that. So it really takes into account the human aspect of the trial, the litigation, the divorce action. Because I think if you go to court, a lot of times, most times, you're at the mercy of the court schedule. There are deadlines, things have to be done, there are motions being filed. Things can come out of nowhere. The other party can file something that you may not expect, and it raises emotions, it raises stress, it takes on a life of its own. And when you're trying to deal with this aspect of your life, and you have children, and you have finances that you need to deal with, the last thing you want is to have an emergency court date because someone filed an emergency motion on you, accusing you of something. It's a better, more amicable way to do things. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not contested issues. And I think that's the big misconception about divorce, about mediation, and about collaborative law, that everybody has to be in agreement on everything and that there's no issues that need to be addressed. No, a lot of mediation and a lot of collaborative law is doing exactly that, addressing those contested issues, but doing it in a way that facilitates and promotes forward movement without getting stuck in the details of why the relationship is ending, because that can be an elephant in the room. That can get in the way of a lot of movement, even in court. People's emotions, resentments, they can cloud and inform their decisions on what to do in litigation. If you do the collaborative law or divorce mediation, you have your divorce coach on the outside, helping you kind of work through those things so you can come in to the table and deal with the issues, not minimizing what everybody's feeling, but contextualizing it, making people understand that things have to be done, and there's another way to deal with that through the divorce coach. So they're more open to working things out. They're better able to work things out. So there's a lot to be said for mediation and collaborative law. There's a lot of benefits to it. And sometimes people try collaborative law and divorce mediation, and it just doesn't work because there's just too many things that are getting in the way. And that's when litigation is available to you. So it really, like I said before, it saves time, it saves money, it saves stress, it saves pressure, and it really provides a lot of peace during a very stressful and emotionally draining time. Kate, do you want to move on to something else?
The only thing I just want to add before we bring Barb in is that I wouldn't look at the process choices linearly. Very often I have cases that start in court, and then at some point we move to mediation, and that's how we're able to resolve our case. I've actually had cases that were in litigation, then I came involved as the collaborative attorney. We took them so far, and then they ended up in mediation. That's the nice thing about understanding your process options, is that You know what they are, and it may be that they're appropriate for you at a certain point in your case.
Exactly. Completely agree. Yeah, I think the key takeaway here is that you do have a choice. You and your spouse have a choice. And there are, you can be in control of the outcome of your divorce with the proper help and support. And it's very empowering. It's extremely empowering to know that, because it's being in the divorce process can be you can feel very vulnerable and overwhelmed. And this gives you some of your power back.
All yours, Barb.
All right, great. Thanks, Lori and Kate. That was great in understanding the various options. So I'm going to talk a little bit first about if you're in the preparing for your divorce. Let's say a lot of couples, they get through the holidays and then early next year, they may decide to tell the kids or to move on with it. Really, when you are contemplating divorce, and Kate alluded to this also, being prepared. You want to start gathering documents, because the more prepared you are, the less Kate has to do or the less Lori has to do. And also it helps a lot when you come to an attorney or a mediator and you have written down on paper, what are the facts of the marriage? How long have you been married? How long, what the situation has been. One person has stayed at home. Again, the more prepared that you can get. And I always have clients fill out a form even before I talk to them, because then that helps make the most out of my time with them when we have the introductory call. If I can just quick read that, and then you don't have to also go through it every single time you're talking to a different professional. You want to think about being prepared, not only from a document standpoint, but also a fact standpoint. Understand, really think about your goals for the process. Do you want to stay in the marital home? Do you want to possibly move? Do you want to switch jobs? You're going to have to go back. Are you going to have to go back to work? Again, now's the time to really think about this, so that when you do hit mediation, you can almost hit the ground running. It's important that when you're in a position where maybe you have access to your spouse's information, take screenshots. I was just in court today and the wife took screenshots of her husband's computer. It's one way of doing it, because you may, when you tell your spouse you want a divorce, you may lose access to that, and then you're at the mercy of disclosure. Those are the most important things when you're planning, is to gather your documents and come prepared financially and facts about the case. Now, once you get to, Michelle, if you can go to the next slide. So now you've talked about, so now we're prepared you've come to meet your meeting with your mediator or your attorney. You have a document that outlines your goals. If you've worked with the CDFA, a lot of times I work with a client before they even talk to their mediator or their attorney, because as Kate mentioned, it's great when someone comes and all the financial information's completely filled out. It helps. You think of sometimes a team as costing more money, but hiring a team and working with experts within their area can actually save you money. I do these financial affidavits again and again. I might be able to do a little quicker than an attorney or paralegal, because they also have everything else on their plate too. Come prepared. Now, if you are at the point where you're thinking about asset division, it's important that you understand it, because there's really no do-overs. So understand the components of it. Very rarely is it a case where you have retirement assets and those are split evenly. You have money in the bank and that's split evenly. A lot of times, because there might be one house, there might be retirement assets, we need to tax adjust things or get everything into an apples comparison. There might be gains or losses associated with an investment portfolio. So the market value on that portfolio might not really be 100,000. It might be 80,000 after you have to sell everything and pay taxes on it. So it's important to understand what your settlement is. And that's something easy that you can engage a CDFA or finance professional for a couple hours just to review your settlement agreement. And you really want to make sure that when you look at the agreement, everything is in its own type. It's in its own type. So you really want to make sure that everything's listed. Your debts, you want to make sure that there's no credit card debt your spouse has that might be in both your names. So you want to make sure that you have everything. I know that someone had asked for a question about in your asset division, is it possible for one person to get more than another person? And the answer is yes, because an equitable division doesn't have to be equal. So, for example, if a spouse has stayed home for, let's say, 15 years while the other spouse worked, the working spouse is paid into Social Security. The stay-at-home spouse, although very productive, the CEO of their family, they're not paying into Social Security. So when you retire, the spouse that has been working is going to get more Social Security. And if you've been out of work for 15 years or so, it's very hard to catch up. Even if you have Social Security is calculated on 35 years of income. So if you didn't work for 15 years and your spouse did, those 15 years are credited as zeros. So that's hard to make up. So that's one reason. And we've been doing more work as more attorneys become familiar with this. We're doing more work on, it's called Social Security equalization. So you want to make sure that both parties are getting an equal amount of Social Security. So to do that, someone may receive more retirement assets. There also could be a reason to get more assets when you have your spouse has now 15 years further into their career. So when you go back to work, your spouse may be at a much higher level. It'll take you a while to catch up. So they have much more significant earning potential because they've been in the workforce and you may not have been. So those are some of the reasons. Your spouse, if they've been working, they may be at a point where their employer contributes to their 401k. You may not in whatever role that you have. So that's something you have to consider. We look at all aspects of how people will receive income going forward, and we try to make sure that it's a level playing field. And one way to do that is to give the non-working spouse CEO a slightly larger percentage of assets. That's something I do a lot of work in that area. And then I will make one note on mediation and collaboration. Sometimes you just don't want to take the decision and put it into somebody else's hands. We just had a court case where the judge looked at assets and apple comparison, I think, and there's no one that she clearly didn't have an understanding of the assets. So here is a way where you had to live with a judge's decision when they really had an incomplete data set and not a full understanding. By going to court and by litigating, you're now leaving it up to somebody else to decide how the assets are going to be split. So if you can use mediation, if you can use collaborative, I highly encourage you to think of that route first, because sometimes you really don't want a judge deciding what your future is. You want to help decide that. And again, with the asset division, there is a price of peace, and you're not going to get a lot of sympathy in front of a judge when, even something which you may think is material, they don't, and they think, I can't believe you're tying up the courts over $100,000, which could be a lot of money, but for some reason they decide it's not. Especially if you have to co-parent in the future, put everything in context of the big picture. And what I like to do with clients is really look at what the settlement is and how they'll do going forward. And that's a nice way to segue into Robin, because ultimately the goal is to produce a settlement that's great for you today, but also preserves your financial future going forward.
Yes, thank you, Barb. That was great. So important to have someone like Barb help you understand how some of these decisions impact your long-term financial security. So you really have to chart that out and have a good understanding of your post-divorce financial reality. But before I get into that, I wanted to talk a little bit about transition fatigue. And you might be feeling a little bit of that tonight, in fact. It's a lot of information and it can feel really overwhelming. And when you're post-divorce, feel great that you got an agreement signed, that you made it to the other side, but now you're faced with all these to-dos to figure out your finances going forward, to get assets moved into your name, to figure out cash flow. And that can come with a lot of overwhelm, especially if you've never done it before. It can affect you cognitively. You might affect you physically. You might not be sleeping, emotionally. As many of the presenters tonight talked about, there's so much that goes into the feelings and emotions when you're in this huge life change, that some of the tools that we use with our clients is now, soon, and later. So prioritizing. So first, check in. Where are you? Are you feeling any of those things? Are you overwhelmed? It's not the best time to be making big decisions. So checking in with yourself and then sorting and prioritizing, working with a team who can help you really figure out what's next. What do I need to make a decision about the house today, or can I push that into the future? Do I need to redo my estate plan? When do all of these various aspects of figuring out this next stage of life come into play for me? So who's on my team is such a critical part. There's really a lot that you can do in that pre-divorce process to get people on your team for this post-divorce process. Your financial advisor. So you have to first determine the level of support you need in all of the areas. Is it your first time doing finances on your own? Then you definitely, I would think, would want a financial advisor to work with. Or maybe you've been working with a financial advisor, but it's your ex-spouse's and you don't feel comfortable moving forward with that person. Maybe you want to do a little bit of it on your own. So determining what level of support you need to move forward. A CPA. So the tax piece, as Barb mentioned, is such a big component of how you value the assets, but also how you deal with your money moving forward. There's some opportunities from when you're newly divorced and you're filing jointly to when you're going to be filing single in that next year. So understanding the tax component, we work a lot with our clients in helping them create a plan for that piece of it. So, who's on your team? What support do you need? And then really the next stage is gaining control of your assets so you can really create some liquidity for yourself so that you can figure out where your income's coming from. So gaining support of your assets starts with the decree, really looking at all of the different aspects in the decree. Again, if you're working with an advisor, they can create a checklist for you to really understand what needs to happen. There are certain timelines in the decree generally from when either the divorce decree is signed or when the court has approved. There are generally timelines of how quickly things need to happen. So understanding that, working with someone who can help you understand all of the different aspects of your decree. I had a case that just settled last week where the process had been going on for a long time. This client did not have access to liquidity, was building up a lot of debt on her credit cards. And we were able to work with the attorney to get into the decree that they could split the non-retirement assets as of the date of the signing of the decree so that you didn't have to wait for the court approval, which takes additional time. So that was a win for her. She actually has access to her money this week and is able to do the things that she needs to do before year end. Really understanding what it is you need for your family is important. And then setting up accounts is another thing that you could do pre-divorce. So if you're working with a financial advisor and you're getting a Roth IRA your IRA taxable account and maybe some other accounts. You can set some of that stuff up in advance so that those things are ready and available for you to transfer dollars to. If you could slide to the next one, please. Yeah, so there's the initial push of understanding your financial picture. And I really think it's very important to take it to the level of, and most clients want to know, are they going to be okay? So what that means is doing a financial plan. What are my assets? What do I need? What am I taking from my assets to live on? And what goals do I have in the future? And will that last my lifetime? So having a good feeling of if you're going to be okay, and if not, what you need to do to make sure that your financial plan is okay, that you're not going to run out of money over your lifetime, that you can really support the goals that are important to you. And you can really, it's an opportunity to start to define what you want that next chapter to look like. So it can be a little bit, I have a lot of clients who come in feeling a bit fearful and overwhelmed, not wanting to see what that looks like. But I really believe that knowledge is power and allows the clients to feel confident about the things that they need to do moving forward. So it's such a critical piece of the puzzle and determining things like risk level of your investment strategy. Your investments really fuel your income and the growth of your money. And what has happened with your investments pre-divorce may not be what you want to happen with your investments post-divorce. I had a client, again, the same client, who had a lot of risky, high growth, concentrated stock positions that now we're going to have to unwind for her so that she can have a more balanced portfolio that more aligns with her risk tolerance, because she's not going to be able to make it up, as Barb said, with income. So she's really going to be relying on the portfolio to provide that for her. Using the financial plan as a foundation to make those decisions can empower you, will help build your financial confidence. And so that speaks to my last point is, what would feeling financially confident look like for you 1 year from now, 5 years from now? What is it that you're feeling gaps in your knowledge, in your support team, in your financial plan that you could work with someone to help you really get to that strong sense of financial well-being, which is possible, and to really create and transform into that next exciting chapter of your life. So that is it for me. And I think now we're going to move over to Laura Gamache, who's going to talk about the home, which is a big piece of the puzzle as well.
Thanks so much, Robin. Appreciate that. So definitely a lot of conversations come up in regarding to the marital home, and depending on where you are in the process of the divorce situation. As early on in the process as someone like myself can be brought on, just to literally simply walk you through what those options are and or what it's going to be looking like of in the situation that's moving forward, and or just having the knowledge heading into the divorce situation, like I mentioned earlier, on just having some basic numbers in regards to what your home value is. There's definitely a number of ways of having that. With myself as a real estate broker, can offer your market analysis at no charge versus paying for an appraisal, which is a third party, of course, that's paid to come out and do an actual full report of an appraised value on the property. So definitely a lot of different avenues around that, and in terms of where you are on the stages of the divorce. So just knowing what the options are, like I mentioned, is someone's going to be coming down to you're sitting on the money. So that the sale will need to happen because you're sitting on the monies of the house of what you're negotiating in regards to that divorce. Or is one party going to be wanting to stay in the home and going to be buying out? Renee can certainly talk more on that. But again, earlier on, the better that you chat with us, because you want to make sure that that actually can happen. So you don't get yourself in a pickle of negotiating that in the divorce decree and then come to find out you can't qualify. So just a lot of these different aspects, you definitely want to make sure you're pulling us in the earlier the better to make sure you're setting yourself up for success and not failure as you're heading in towards the divorce and or finalizing the decree, etc. Of course, at that point too, we're going to be having a discussion of the home itself, And then obviously on to the next steps of what it looks like for what your next home's going to look like. If you're going to be both moving into separate homes, are you going to be looking to going into a rental, or you're going to want to be pulling the funds from the sale and or whatnot to be wanting to qualify to look for a purchase? Is there going to be some type of a transition, or do we have to kind of line things up? So a lot of the timing thing really does matter of that. So you can plan accordingly with the home and or that transition next steps into what that next chapter is going to look like with you. Definitely, while it's very important to work with a divorce realtor, real estate agent like myself, just really knowing the components and everything that goes into the divorce that you've heard so far. It's a lot. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of different steps. So working with someone like myself that really knows the steps and what kind of comes into this, so we can really map out a well-geared game plan on what we're going to do with the home. Okay. And other things to consider for sure, as well as the market, right? What type of market are we in right now? What does that look like? What does 2026 market look like, which I'll get into in a minute? Just because of given circumstances of what's been going on, has there been maintenance to the home that has been deferred for some time? And do we need to look at that? Do we really look at some of those steps in regards to, do we need to really maybe tackle some of those while we are getting perhaps possibly ready for preparing the home for the market? Before I jump into kind of some steps here, just to circle back with kind of what the forecast is for 2026. So we definitely saw a little stagnant in 2025 for existing home sales, right? It was definitely a year of transition, which we typically see every 4 years, just in regards to the economy. There always is a little bit of investors are always want to hang tight, see what actually happens. So naturally, we see that every 4 years, and then just are coming off of the longest real estate kind of increase of our market in history. As also, we've started to see a bit of a softening of the market, right? So we've been seeing that more so parts of the country have definitely been feeling a lot more softening. And in terms for price points here in New England, we've been a little bit more protected just given our location that our building has not kept up in regards to other parts of the country. So that kind of that supply and demand had kept our market and very much is very still of a strong seller's market. Definitely depends on the price point, definitely depends on the location. However, pricing has been you have to really be a lot more precise and or making sure that you're pricing accurately. If it's pricing accurately, then we're seeing homes sell, but we see a lot of homes that are not priced correctly, and that's contributing to our days on market. Just give some kind of just stats overall, just more or less on a New Hampshire base. We're still have seen our average median sales price in New Hampshire right now is still hovering around 5.25. So we're still seeing that's still our average median sales price. Where average days on market, the majority of the state collectively is around a little over a month, so around 33 days. Like I mentioned, certain price points were maybe perhaps sitting a little longer, but at least on an average days on market in our state in New Hampshire right now is still hovering a little over a month. So that again can go to show that again we're still in that kind of that market that is still in demand for inventory in our state. We'll definitely see the total sales volume that's increased 11% since November of last year. So again, we're still seeing that demand here. And again, same thing with pending sales. That also is up 18% compared to November of last year. Our closed sales volume is only up 0.7% kind of since November of last year. And again, we're in December, so I'm obviously a closing or out of going from our month end of November. So that's why comparing to obviously once we're into January, I'll have December stats. But anyways, collectively, we're definitely still seeing a very healthy market, a seller's market. So that's more in a local snapshot. On a national snapshot of what the forecast is for 2026, we saw an existing home sales was only increased for 2025 of 3%. So you can see that there was definitely a little bit of that softening of that market in 2025. The forecast right now for 2026 is that's going to be increased by 14%. So they're already anticipating that we're going to see a strong real estate market for existing home sales for that to increase for the overall sales. For new home sales, so this means new construction, we saw a very stagnant in this past year due to the economy, due to that bit of that softening. We actually saw a decrease in new home sales versus what they're forecasting for 2026, that they're actually forecasting an increase. They actually adjusted it in October. They were forecasting that it was going to increase by 3%. They're now expecting that it's going to increase by 5% for new home sales, meaning new construction. Median home prices, we saw that stay pretty steady throughout the year of 2025. They saw roughly a 0.1% increase. They're forecasting, and this is on a national level, remember, that they're forecasting on a national level for the median home prices to increase by 4%. So just not a wild uptick, but again, just a little bit of uptick since we call that little stagnant this year. So they're forecasting just a little bit of that, feeling that boost on the economy. Mortgage rate, of course, a lot of discussions, a lot of hype over mortgage rates lately. They're here to stay. We saw it hit kind of high sixes into sevens in 2025. We've already seen them trickle down into low sixes, and they're forecasting that we'll see that still hovering around this 6%, mark in the 2026. Just some forecasting, which gives maybe some better view depending on where you're at. If that kind of that home will be something that it's going to be up for discussion in 2026 going into it, again, giving that at least maybe this year might be at least will be a good healthy time for the real estate market for that. So always a big concern of when should we sell? Do we do it now? Do we do it later? Always a conversation, always a question that I'm asked with that. So again, that's that global of national snapshot versus a more in a local snapshot. So moving on to the next slide, just walks you through a little bit about just, again, the full kind of picture. I'll touch on a little bit before I hand you over to Renee. But again, inventory, like I mentioned, all of that just comes into relative of starting to see the inventory take up. And like I mentioned, they get the value. So appraisal or a market analysis, like I mentioned, ones you paid for, ones you can get at any real estate agent, broker can provide and typically at no cost, right? Just getting definitely copies of everything, documenting. Some parties will be required to get an appraisal. Some, again, I'm working with a lot of divorce attorneys for getting that market analysis so they can have something that they can use as they are negotiating the financials, et cetera, on what that's going to look like on finalizing. And then, of course, like I mentioned earlier on, evaluating just the housing affordability and what the options are, right? Is keeping the home, selling the home, owned jointly, which is can has its own challenges, or is one going to be buying out the other with that, which Renee will chat more on what that looks like and the feasibility of it. So with that, I'll pass it on to you, Renee.
Excellent. Thanks, Laura. Sorry, I'm losing my voice a little bit. So I am going to touch on the mortgage side of things to wrap it up tonight. So we've heard from our panel, and if there's a theme, if you've noticed, all of our expertise intersects with each other, right? So even though I'm talking about mortgages, my piece touches on the legal side of things. It certainly touches on the emotional side. It touches on the financial side. It touches the real estate side, right? So everything intersects, which again is why you want to start with your team. Michelle, if you could go back one slide for me. Thank you. I wanted to touch on sort of the steps in the process for the mortgage side of things. So we want to start with a full financial picture. So when you're thinking about the process and what does divorce look like and preparing for it, we heard from the legal team and the financial team, there's a lot of documents to gather. The same thing applies on the mortgage side. So we have to gather all the paperwork and have all of the information. So while you're gathering for the legal side and the financial side, you may want to consider collecting 2 copies of everything, because we're going to need those for the mortgage side of things as well to put some numbers together for you. And the other piece is understanding the value of your house, right? We're splitting our assets. We have to put a value to those assets. And as Laura mentioned, you have the option of having an appraisal done or having a market analysis done by a realtor. So those are the beginning steps, because we're going to need that information on the mortgage side as well. We need to know what the value is, but we also need to know how that asset is going to be split because a lot of times the mortgage is involved with that. So evaluating your housing affordability early comes into play here. So you want to talk with your lender as soon as possible, because all of the decisions that you're going to make, one of the biggest is what do we do with the home, right? What are our options? You may have an idea of, I'd like to keep the house. I want to stay in the home with the kids. Or usually clients will come to me with an idea of what they would like to do with the house moving forward. But we have to look at the bigger picture. What does it look like financially? What does it look like from a mortgage perspective? And Barb was talking about not all assets are equal. And we talk about the tax implications, your options of keeping the home, selling the home, owning it jointly, or buying out a spouse. What does that look like financially, and how does that work in your overall financial picture? Next slide for me, please, Michelle. Thank you. So one of the pieces of the puzzle when we're talking about what are our options in keeping the house or buying a spouse out is looking at the structure of your income, whether that's your income or your support, which is also considered income from a mortgage perspective. So when we talk about support and using it as income to qualify you for a mortgage, we're looking at documented income. We have to show that you've received it generally for 6 months before we can use it as income to qualify you. We have to show that it's stable and consistent, and we have to show that it has a continuance of at least 3 years. And there's different variables in that: where you receive the money, how you receive the money, how much. There's rules around that. So again, talking with your lender early to understand what the options are. We want to make sure that you're successful. And if you have a goal of X, we want to make sure that you can get there. We need to make sure that your final divorce settlement agreement is written up properly so that we can do what you're looking to do, what's required from a legal standpoint from you. So again, talking with your lender early to understand that, it's going to make it that much easier for you. When we talk about income and support, one thing I wanted to mention was, if you are receiving support and you're intending to use it as income to help you qualify for a mortgage, monthly income from your spouse is much better than a lump sum income. It gives us more options in how to use the income to qualify you. So again, talking with your lender early to understand how we can structure it properly. I also wanted to mention credit. Credit is super important at this stage, whether you're contemplating divorce, if you are in the middle of it, your credit's going to come into play no matter what your housing decision is going to be, whether it's keeping the house, whether it's selling the house and renting, whether it's buying out the spouse. Your credit's going to come into play. Your credit will be pulled no matter which route you go. So we want to make sure we're maintaining your credit scores throughout the process. We can get overwhelmed with how much is on our plate during this process. And maybe you weren't the financial person in the household, right? Not everybody takes on the financial role. Everyone has a different role in the household, and maybe yours wasn't the financial side of things. But going forward, you will have your own household that you will be responsible for the finances. Understanding what debts are in your name and making sure that all of those are accounted for in the final divorce settlement. Right? Maybe there's a credit card in your name, but it was the household card that was used for household expenses. That needs to be addressed in the final settlement as to who's going to be responsible for paying that. So looking at your credit early and understanding what debts are in your name is going to be super helpful. Making sure your debts are paid on time, that's going to be huge. Again, we know it's overwhelming during this process, but we want to make sure that the debts are being paid on time. If they're not, that's where it has a huge negative effect on your credit. So again, just being mindful, setting some reminders for yourself when payments are due, and making sure that they get paid on time. And then closing accounts. Be very careful about closing any of your accounts. The way your credit score, the way the algorithm works to create that credit score for you, the length of time that you've had credit An open line of credit has a huge impact on your score. So if you close an account, let's say a credit card, for example, if you close an account, it's going to have a negative effect on your score. So again, talk with your lender early so you understand the options so that we can prepare and do it in a manner that will have the least amount of effect on your score. Next slide, please, Michelle. So managing your debt division. So when we talk about what a final settlement looks like and who's going to be responsible for which debts, I want you to understand that even though the divorce settlement says one spouse might be responsible for the payments, if the other spouse is on that account, your credit is still affected, right? So even if the divorce settlement says that credit card is in spouse one's name, but spouse two is responsible for the payment, but spouse two doesn't make the payment, it's spouse one's credit that gets affected. So we have to be very careful about how the settlement is written up and understanding clear timelines for removing somebody from a debt. Maybe there's a car loan that's going to be refinanced into somebody else's name. Making sure that those timelines are set up in the final settlement so everybody's expectations are the same, okay? Considering home equity wisely. Barb was talking about the tax implications for some of these decisions, and even though we might have some equity in the house, there could be some tax implications, and capital gains is one of those. We're fortunate in the Northeast that we do have a lot of equity in our homes, but we have to be careful about any tax consequences. So Barb talked about that equalization as she was talking about Social Security, but it applies to the equity in the house as well, because we need to understand what the tax implications will be down the road. If you're the spouse looking to keep the house, it may not be that straightforward. So we want to make sure that we understand what those tax implications are, and your final settlement clearly states timelines and things for buyouts and who's going to be responsible for what. And then lastly, creating a realistic budget for your new reality, right? So I mentioned you will be in charge of your finances going forward. You will be the manager of your household finances alone. And so post-divorce, we want to make sure that you have a realistic housing budget. And again, that's where Barb and Robin can help you to understand. Just because your lender tells you that you might qualify for a mortgage, that doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing financially for you. So understanding the bigger picture and looking at some cash flow worksheets and understanding all of your options and what's going to be in your best interest moving forward. So that's all that I wanted to go through tonight with you. We're running up on just about 20 past. We will ask all of the panelists to come back. And if there are any questions, anybody wants to post anything in the Q&A for us, we can stick around for another minute or two and answer those. We had a couple of questions from the registrations. I think we answered those already. But if anybody has any other questions they'd like to put in the Q&A, please do. I know we are smack in the middle of the holiday season, so everybody's a little preoccupied, I'm sure. So it doesn't look like we have any more questions. So with that, I'm going to say thank you for joining us tonight. And Mandy, our concierge, will be in touch with you in the next couple of days. If you'd like an appointment with any of us, she can help facilitate that. Otherwise, thanks for joining us tonight, and come back and see us again. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.